Hello everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer today. Happy Tuesday everyone. I hope your guys' week is going well. Back at it with another video. We're going to be taking a look at this week's Mars in Taurus square Pluto in Aquarius. If you guys like this content and you want to see more of it, make sure you click the bell button below, subscribe to the channel. That way you're alerted as to when we have new astro videos out. We're here every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, helping you guys make sense of what's going on with the cosmos. I'm calling this aspect or this transit the raging bull, and you guys are going to see why as we kind of unpack this and talk a little bit about the intensity revolving around this particular transit. This week, some of us are going to find out we're not cut out to be matadors, so you might want to be careful and not upset the bull. The transit of this date is actually beginning on the 11th. So as you guys are watching this today, June 11th is when it's perfecting. But we are feeling it really the 10th all the way through the 12th of June. So it can take a couple days or a couple degrees for this energy to heat up. Maybe you started feeling it over the weekend and it'll be in play for a few days. So be mindful of that. It is taking place at 1 degree of Taurus. So if you have anything from 0 to 2 degrees of Taurus, it's most intense for you. Equally, my Aries and Scorpio risings, watch out. You guys are going to be feeling the intensity as your chart ruler is squaring with Pluto, and all 0 to 2 degrees of the fixed signs. But the truth is, you don't have to have any personal planets in Taurus or the fixed signs to feel this. Mars rules the North Node in Aries, and this will be felt collectively. Make sure you check out my June 2024 horoscopes for each and every one of the 12 rising signs. This is one of the major aspects that I touch on for the month ahead, so you can check that out in my monthlies if you want to see where in your natal horoscope this is taking place and how it's affecting you. Now, in my opinion, this week is going to be teaching us that true power is not the ability to exert control over others, but the ability to control oneself and to keep calm and centered in any situation. If there's any takeaway from this particular video, that should be it. Stay cool, stay calm, stay collected, especially when you're feeling the pressure, and be mindful that there are some combative energies in the skies this week. Now, I think Mars in Taurus really teaches us about simple patience, right? Taurus, the sign ruled by Venus, the exaltation of the moon, slow and taking your time. So as Mars moves through this sign, this is one of the first challenges that he will be feeling throughout his trek in Taurus. And it will not be an easy battle. We will also see Mars conjoin with Uranus later in July. We're going to see that conjunction. So there's a couple kind of hurdles for Mars to go through as he moves through this sign. Now the square to Pluto in Aquarius, this is really screaming. This is a sign of the times. So the question is, as we go through this transit today and tomorrow, how do you handle things while you're feeling the pressure? How do you react to pressure? Do you double down, or do you let the crowds fight amongst themselves while you stay the path undistracted? This is a really good time to have tunnel vision, eyes on the prize. Don't get swept up in the collective drama. There can be angry crowds, protests, etc. We are already seeing some of this energy kind of playing out a little early because Mars has been at 29 degrees of Aries, reenacting that solar eclipse in Aries that we had in the spring of 2023. You guys can't forget that eclipse. It was 29 degrees, a critical degree, and it was in a square to Pluto. So it was already foreshadowing that with these incoming eclipses in the signs of Aries and Libra, we were going to see conflict amongst others and ourselves. I want you guys to really focus on distance if you're feeling disrespected. I think that's a big key that's going to come up with this. Taurus is a sign that does not want drama, does not want conflict, and unfortunately, when Mars, the god of war, squares off with Pluto, lord of the underworld, it's really hard to avoid conflict. So if you're feeling threatened or disrespected, taking distance is the only way to respond. Mind your business, because some fights are not worth the exchange or expelling excess energy that you really don't feel like you can give out. Equally, be mindful of your energy. It can be really easy to burn out with these particular squares where we're feeling like we're pushing ourselves over the limit. Really, it's about focusing on building a life around the things that we love, not around the things that we hate. Because Taurus is ruled by Venus, Mars's trek through the sign is really having us focus on taking action in regards to building the things that we love, the relationships, the resources, the art, all of these things. And Pluto, unfortunately, can have connections and associations with hate. So remember that it just takes a little bit of light to kind of illuminate the dark. We don't want to get sucked into some of the conflict that can be happening, and we want to be trying to promote peace. Now, Mars in Taurus represents a drive for stability, okay? So we're going to see Mars in this sign for roughly 6 weeks. It's all about security and comfort, and there's also this focus with Mars in Taurus for perseverance and determination. So when we see the square taking place, these particular actions, these themes relating to Taurus are being challenged by Pluto. Now I'll explain why in just a second, but this is the opening square. So maybe you guys have heard me reference in other videos that around February 14th, 2024, we saw Mars and Pluto in conjunction in the sign of Aquarius. So this is the first opening square that we're going to be seeing in regards to that. This represents like challenges and obstacles that are just now arising since that conjunction point. So it's a really good idea to pull out your chart, take a look at where Taurus is. That's where the action is. Mars moving through there is trying to get you to take your time and not move too quickly or too abruptly. Now look at where Aquarius is in your chart. That's where Pluto is. This is where you're going through some kind of change and transformation. Pluto is also now retrograde. It'll be retrograde until it enters back into the sign of Capricorn briefly later this fall. Now, when I think of, this energy of Taurus and determination and focusing on slow, steady building, the challenge really is Pluto. And Pluto in Aquarius is about transformation of energy in the realm of social structures, technology, and the future. This is all about a focus on innovation and humanitarianism. So we're going to see the changes and transformations in politics, science, technology, and collective themes, and how that's challenging all of our resources, our food, our land, our stability, and also our values. Now, I want to read to you guys just briefly. I pulled a couple books out to give you some really kind of like rich information in regards to this to expand on what I already have for you. I haven't read from this book for a little while, so I wanted to read to you guys The Archetypal Universe by Ren Butler. I love this book because it's so different than most astrology cookbooks. It gives you so many great blends of different planets working with one another. Now, this doesn't focus so much on the aspects per se, but it's going to take the archetype of each planet and talk about when you put them together, either in pairs or in triples, like what they all kind of mean when you blend them together. So I'm just going to read a little bit of this. And I will say just, kind of before I even get into this, like the themes of Mars and Pluto are extremely intense. There can be some very violent things that can come up with these aspects. There can be things that relate to death and like sexual assault and attacks and things of that nature. So I'm going to try to keep it like PG, but I'm just letting you know that some of this stuff does come up throughout some of the text. Okay, so this is what he has to say about Mars-Pluto combinations. Principles are intense willpower and courage, drive and passion, determined efforts towards renewal and regeneration, volcanic catharsis, tendencies towards brute force and ruthlessness, overexertion, pushing too hard, vulgar or coarse sexuality. So when we think about Pluto, right, like Lord of the Underworld, death, rebirth, transformation, but it's ultimately about purging and purification. So it can also be about expressing and clearing things. So when we see the Mars square to Pluto, it's forceful things that are happening that don't feel uncomfortable. They upset the status quo. It can really hurt us, right? Mars, especially when it comes to values, resources, money, so this can be a very financial thing as well, especially collectively out in the world. Now, collective character themes are passionate intensity and drive, willpower and determination, dynamic and purposeful action, qualities of assertiveness and decisiveness, courage and resolve, guns and gumption, the capacity to blunder through, force ahead despite opposition, the will to do, the soul to dare, high and sustained levels of energy, powerful reserves, strength and endurance, the ability to heal or transform situations through cooperative effort, profound physical renewal and regeneration, volcanic catharsis and healing sessions, feeling of sexual empowerment, primal energies, regeneration through sexuality. But something else that kind of comes up is a lot of shadow themes. You know, squares are the energy of Mars. It does represent something that is outside of us, that forces us to take some kind of action. And with this particular square, in our own lives, but also out in the world, actions will have consequences. So the consequences can be physical, financial, but it can also be things revolving around pain, transformation, endings, new beginnings, ultimately making way for something new. So when I think of Mars and Pluto, they're some of the bad boys of astrology. You know, they do have this tendency to use brute force, and whether this is through the art of war, or it's through combativeness, or it's through hostility, or anything revolving around like force, where we force something to the point where it's broken, it's ended, it's torn, it cannot be salvaged, sometimes are the themes. So there can be a tendency towards excessive self-will and machismo, overexertion, and pushing too hard. A sense of escalating heaviness, feeling drawn into situations and drawn out into one's aggressive tendencies. Urges towards brute force and ruthlessness. Okay, definitely a theme here. Feelings of savage ferocity, raging aggression. I feel an army in my fist. Those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. A struggle between the impulses towards self-preservation and those of transcendence, between personal will and divine will. A need to aim one's aggressive energies at transcendence, represented by the space above the head, the seventh chakra, rather than the other people on Earth's living things. Interesting. Okay, so what else do we have here? So archetypes and spirituality, a sense of intense death and rebirth struggle, driving volcanic forces, cathartic heaving and convulsions, raging one's way towards freedom, blood and thunder, unleashing the fires of hell. What else do we have here? Clash of the Titans, the wrath of Achilles, the Greek slaughter of the Trojans, the Old Testament battles and massacres. And during these transits, the Mars archetype can add energy, passion, and pointed direction to any of the themes associated with Pluto. Struggle and aggression. Aggressive feelings may also lead to sexual elements, dreams of treacherous seduction, making someone perform things on them that they do not want. It gets a little racy. And then these archetypes add forceful dynamite and volcanic elements to healing sessions, helping journeyers get in touch and express any buried aggressive feelings. As always, during this process, it's important to say that they stay on their mats rather than getting up and acting out in external situations. Lying down is the safest, most effective position to experience every emotion fully. Interesting. So that's just a little food for thought. I mean, honestly, I feel like, you know, generally Mars and Taurus is not a very combative energy, you know, unless it's heavily aspected in a natal chart or in the skies. And I feel like this is going to be where the raging bull is going to come out as a result of, you know, Pluto kind of having a chokehold over something collectively or in regards to the future. But when something's taken away from Taurus, whether it's food or security, home, resources, it definitely can get a little combative and it can fight back. And when we're looking at Taurus or any connections with the second house, it is very much about what the person possesses, what I have to hold, to spend, what I consume, what I save, versus what's going on collectively with everyone else. And so it may not always just be about money and resources and land. So we can see squabbles over that during this transit. But it can also be about people really sticking to their guns when it comes to their morals and, you know, what they truly value. Taurus energy can be, you know, very dogmatic. It can also be very fixed in its ways because it's a fixed sign. And it can also be rather conservative or traditional. So we're seeing a little bit of a battle between, you know, what is transformational collectively, what is futuristic, what is inclusive with Pluto and Aquarius, versus the impact that that's having on all of us on a personal level, not just financially, but also when it comes to our morals and our beliefs. Some themes that I have for you guys that you're just going to want to watch as this is playing out in the skies. I just have a few of them and how this may kind of affect everything collectively and then what to watch for. But obviously a Mars-Pluto square, you know, that is textbook power struggles. So Mars representing that action and assertiveness, while Pluto signifies power and transformation. When they form this square, we're definitely going to see that it can lead to intense power struggles and conflicts on a societal level. So archetypally, this is the farmers, versus the politicians. This is going to be the banks versus groups of people who are coming together and talking about freedom when it comes to wealth and power or energy or resources. And the list can kind of go on and on. But you'll see that friction between the archetypes of Taurus and Aquarius. Now, I think this is spelling out economic tension. I'll give you guys some examples of how I'm already seeing this out in the world later in the video. But because Taurus is associated with material resources and stability, that opening square with Pluto brings about a drastic change or upheaval in economic systems, potentially leading to financial crisis or reforms. Now, I want to remind you guys, this is something that's already been seeded. So it's something that's already been happening since basically February of this year. Now, because of the major transformations, changes, also unions, right? We think of like Aquarius is unions. It's also about groups of people who are banding together and working together. And Mars being the ruler of the North Node, it means that we are starting to see collective leaders, or we're starting to see collective powerful groups coming together to be able to create some kind of change. So it's already been seeded. Now we're starting to see the first kind of effects of whatever's been taking place since February. But definitely, I think added pressure is going to be going on with the financial system throughout this transit. Likely, this is also going to be spelling out technological and societal transformations because of the connection with Pluto and Aquarius and the changes that are going on with technology, innovation, social progress, but also social unrest. And so I think that the square with Mars can basically accelerate technological advances or spark significant social movements and revolutions, likely going up against what Pluto is hoping to do. Maybe call me optimistic, but I really look at like Mars and Taurus as being like, blue collar jobs and trade jobs and things that people are artisanal at. So if you're somebody who can be, making pottery, if you're a potter or a sculptor, or if you're somebody who, makes a specific kind of jewelry or oil paintings, right? We think of Taurus as like the traditional arts. That is pushing back up against AI. It's pushing up against, mass creation of products. It's going to be pushing back up against, technological advancements that are threatening that. So you're going to see a little bit of like a divide between people who want to focus on where we're going with the future and people who want to kind of stay the path with what is considered to be traditional beauty or traditional art. And we're going to see that kind of like standoff from the two. And then obviously environmental issues are going to be a theme here because Taurus is associated with land, and it's associated with values, and whether this is minerals or things pertaining to valuable substances, food, agriculture. That square to Pluto is going to be definitely this week highlighting environmental concerns, leading to debates and actions regarding ecological preservation or where people are taking advantage of resources. Just as an example, I was like floored. I saw an interview earlier this week, a couple days ago, where Lindsey Graham was doing an interview on one of the major talk news radios, or it was a news station. And he was basically saying point blank, and I will try to find the link to this because I want to be as specific as I can. He basically said that the war in Ukraine is a war that the United States cannot afford to lose, and that so much has been invested in making sure that they are protecting and preserving Ukraine because of their very valuable minerals, okay, quote. And so I don't know what that means, but it makes me start to kind of wonder if this is the foreshadowing of Mars in Taurus, where there is action, war, conflict, combat over things that are valuable, that we can spend, that we can turn into something else, that we can melt down, things that we can consume or that we can harvest. These are all Taurus related things, and that square to Pluto was like starting to kind of expose the shadow of Pluto and kind of showing like the darker things that are kind of going on in regards to like, people banding together and political affiliations and, support of like other groups. And so that I found that to be like absolutely perfect, spot on example of kind of the stuff that's coming up with this square. In terms of what you want to watch for, obviously intense personal transformations. After all, the North Node is ruled by Mars, so we really want to pay attention to Mars transits with this, at least until the beginning of 2025. I do think this is going to be a little bit more impactful than most people realize with this square because of that connection to the North Node. The North Node is in Aries, so it is all about being daring and being fierce and independent and mobilizing militaries. And we do hear a lot of people beating the war drums with this North Node here. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what we must do, but we're going to be feeling archetypally out in the world that we are seeing more of that warrior spirit and that fierceness of standing up and defending, or being a little bit more combative and protecting something, right? Especially Mars and Taurus, protecting something that we deem valuable. So what we can find is that there's intense periods of personal transformation that are kind of going on this week with this transit. You may experience profound changes in the areas related to these houses, which is why you need to know where Taurus and Aquarius is. Most likely the action that's taking place in Taurus is creating the change and the transformation in the Aquarius energy of your chart. This does mean, with the square between Mars and Pluto, right, the two bad boys of astrology, that there is likely going to be conflict and confrontations. Now, per my astrological studies, like my belief is that the opening square, Pluto in this case is in a superior position. He has a higher vantage point over Mars. And not often does a Pluto-Mars square materialize as Mars cutting loose and, running off with something and like winning some kind of fight. He may win the battle, but he's not going to win the war here. So he's not in a superior position. He's also moving through a sign that he does not have the capabilities of being able to kind of put on all his armor and do his best work. So we are likely going to see Mars as a bit of like the underdog in this situation. But as we kind of go on throughout this transit, like I said, we will see Mars meet with Uranus. So there's going to be some really explosive things happening next month, especially collectively when it comes to world finances and resources. And then eventually Mars will move into Gemini, trine Pluto, and meet up with Jupiter, where there is going to be a huge focus on communication and mobilization and taking action. Big time for media, big time for journalists. But for right now, just know that Mars almost feels as if he's being threatened. So there can be more conflicts and confrontations. And so, this aspect, what it does is it's bringing up underlying tensions and bringing it to the surface. It's like expressing like a pimple or something, like literally it's pushing it out and removing all of the inflammation or all of the excess heat and purging what has kind of been beneath the surface. This will lead to confrontation in personal relationships, workplaces, and other areas of our life, but sometimes we need to clear the air. And I think that, at least for me, the positive side of this is that we can do it in a way where we're doing it because we need more stability. We need more, resources. We need to get kind of right with our financial situation or even with, with our values. So for a lot of you guys, it could materialize as making changes in your budget, that there are certain things financially that are getting to a point where you're just kind of realizing, you really have to kind of call a spade and make some adjustments or make some changes. I do think that this is going to be bringing up conflicts and confrontations revolving around rising prices of food and cost of food. I do think we're going to be hearing more about where people are getting angry and they're voting with their dollar and not voting for, certain political figures because of their stance on, resources and finances in the future, and supporting others or donating to others where they feel like they're going to be championing their cause. Example, just recently in Nevada, Trump was campaigning, claiming and telling everybody in Las Vegas that he aims, if he becomes president, to come in and make the decision to basically get rid of any taxes on tips for like gig workers or people who are in hospitality or entertainment. No, I'm not preaching for Trump. I'm neutral. I'm not for either side, to be honest with you. But I think this is a prime example with Mars coming into a square with Pluto that's like, look, you work hard, you deserve to be able to keep your tips and your money, and I am challenging the pre-existing system, right, Aquarius, where, there is taxation that can be too excessive, Pluto and Aquarius. So we're going to see things like this where people are going to be talking about, parallel economies and cryptocurrencies and what they're wanting to do to help support the farmers or help support agriculture or helping keep more money in your pocket. And so that can be part of that kind of release of the pressure that we can see out in the world. Obviously, there will be conflict because of that, because some of the things that can be said can be controversial, but there can also be people pushing people's buttons in regards to financial matters. ultimately, Mars-Pluto squares are about empowerment and self-mastery, right? So Pluto is kind of saying something needs to change, and Mars is learning how to respond in a way that is very calculated. It's very art of war. In this situation, Mars is much more likely in the opening square to act up a little bit and kind of get checked by Pluto, so be mindful of that. And while this is challenging, this transit can provide opportunities for personal empowerment and mastery over one's desires and ambitions. Learning to be more focused on what you are building, slow and steady, and being conservative to be able to transform and reach your long-term, goals. That really is what Aquarius is all about. Now, this does require us to take some kind of action on a personal level with Mars and Taurus. It means that we need to be really making those changes day in and day out in our own lives to be able to have a ripple effect and help transform the collective. Easier said than done, but still, that's really what this is about. And with fixed squares, we see a lot of stubbornness, we see a lot of resistance because both Taurus and Aquarius are fixed signs. So because Taurus's connection with Venus, it wants to have pleasure, it wants to indulge, it wants to feel good, it wants to have security, it's very sensual. And that connection with Aquarius and the ruler, the traditional ruler being Saturn, which is a restrictive kind of limiting energy. And then also that connection to the modern day ruler Uranus, which can be kind of unpredictable, combative, kind of when you think it's going to go left, it goes right. The square can manifest as resistance to change or difficulty in adapting to new circumstances. So likely we're going to see that there is going to be maybe financial things that end up impacting our goals, or through change in our spending habits, how that impacts something about our relationship with other people and how we're socializing and what we're doing. Hopefully leading to a shift in the way that we look at status and like what it actually means to be wealthy. And not feeling like there needs to be, this constant kind of keeping up with the Joneses and like, okay, this person did this, so I have to do that. Learning to actually go our own way and start really reevaluating at our core what's important to us and what we need to be working towards, and separating ourselves, because Mars-Pluto can be severing or separating from a toxic kind of perspective or belief that something has to be a certain way. And certainly I think we may see this also in a political sense as well, where people are kind of between a rock and a hard place in regards to, well, I've always voted along this party line, but I don't really align with this particular candidate, but I'm going to be voting based off of what I think is going to be best for my business, for my family, based off of, which candidate I think is going to have the best kind of economic plan. I think we're going to hear a lot about that. After all, Mars can also be about leaders, and we'll see more about that later in the year with Mars and Leo. But right now, money talks, and we're going to be seeing, what needs to change, break down, or transform in regards to some of these financial systems to be able to better make the necessary changes, I think, within politics. Easier said than done. Now, navigating this energy, just be mindful of the power dynamics, okay? Just know that this is a time period, today, the next day or so, where, what usually would not necessarily set somebody off can really set somebody off. We can see that there can be power struggles, there can be manipulative tendencies with Pluto and Mars. Pluto can be kind of enticing Mars and kind of, trying to kind of get a rise out of him. You can see this in your own life. You can see this in regards to relationship with other people. It can be dangerous, okay? And I'm not like a fear-mongering astrologer, but day in and day out, I see these transits with clients, or I see this play out, in the skies, and we see events that do kind of mirror this. Oftentimes Mars is wielding some kind of weapon, so it can be about a weapon that can be about self-defense. It can be something revolving around, weaponizing, possession of something, Taurus, weaponizing money in some way, and it can be combative. But like I said, Mars and Taurus isn't generally, one of the more dangerous placements that I see. However, I'll give you some examples when we get to the end of the video. I really feel like maybe this is about where art and artists and creatives and also people who are willing to take risks financially are the ones who are pushing back against some of these, Pluto and Aquarius kind of toxic collective themes in terms of how we're actually looking at the bigger picture and what's actually best for everyone. So we could see some artists, kind of like makes me feel like Banksy or something, some artist that comes out and like, goes in and goes out and does these like murals and these images and things that can be very kind of politically influenced and world affair influenced, but it can be something beautiful, right? Even though it's something that, and it's some of his work is very valuable. I think that's a perfect example of Mars square Pluto. But at the same time, it's also a bit of an outlaw, right? Mars can be a bit of an outlaw. So I'm wondering if we're going to see some like murals and some other things from artists that are really kind of challenging what's going on with some of these power dynamics globally. Embrace change, be open to it. I think this can be an energy where if we don't force things, but we become where we're uncomfortable, it can really show us where there's a need to transmute some of these things and use it as like gas to get the car to go where we want to go. So while, resisting change is natural, try to remain flexible during this transformative period, because I think it can lead to growth and empowerment. Make lemonade. Look at a situation and go, no, I don't like this. I'm going to make a change. And don't let fear run the show. Focus on constructive action, because this can be very, very destructive very quickly. We want to channel Mars's energy into productive activities such as pursuing goals, working on projects, or engaging in physical exercise. But similar to squares that I see with Saturn, where I can see some people have some broken bones or sprained ankles or, like pulling or tearing muscles. In the background, there are some other squares to Saturn that are still either building with Mercury square Saturn, or they're separating with the Sun and Venus coming out of a square with Saturn. The skies are really saying that we can't force something all at once too quickly, because if we do that, we're going to have delays, we're going to have hangups, there's going to be accidents. So still take your time when it comes to making change. I think that if you're putting your energy into something that is, physical exercise or burning off steam or like whatever, just take your time and feel like you don't have to force it. Don't go 0 to 60. Cultivate patience and perseverance. And I think, Taurus is such a patient sign, and Mars definitely going through Taurus can be testing a lot of you guys right now. But I think that it's also about learning how to use our energy and our actions in constructive ways, being patient and seeing steady progress. So we want to see this transit develop into resilience and perseverance in the face of challenges. When somebody goes, low, you go high. Do not meet fire with fire. It's not going to help. Make sure that you're really taking your time to make sure that you're taking a breath, counting to 10, not reacting to things, because people will be set off in ways that they typically are not with this transit. Practice self-reflection. I think this is not specific to the Mars square Pluto, but after all, Saturn is still kind of the dispositor of Pluto, because Saturn's the traditional ruler of Aquarius. So there's something to be said about the fact that we need to take our time, we need to reflect, we need to think about things before we react. There can be deadly consequences for a Mars-Pluto square. So I think with Saturn kind of getting ready to go retrograde pretty soon, and some of the squares to Saturn from Gemini to Saturn in Pisces, we need to think before we speak. We need to be mindful that anger and frustration and rage, they can make us do and say some things that we're not very proud of. And ultimately, all of those negative energies really kind of boil down to fear. It comes from fear. Everything is derivative of love or fear. So if you're feeling some of these lower octave energies of Pluto and Mars, you really want to sit with that anger, and you want to ask yourself, why am I angry? What is it coming from? What is the root cause? So you can get to the bottom of it and uproot it. I think of like Mars-Pluto squares as like going and weeding your garden. Sometimes you have to kind of get in there and dig it up and then force it out. And without doing that, your garden could not grow. Everything would be taken over by weeds. I kind of see the same thing with the Mars-Pluto square and like hate and anger and jealousy and possessiveness. This isn't going to allow things to flourish, right? So definitely practice self-reflection and, use this as a time to explore your motivations and address any subconscious fears. Pluto is a planet that deals with, psychology. So I think a lot of this is going to be the psychology revolving around the angry crowd, where everybody just kind of bandwagons together and reacts to things or jumps to conclusions and becomes hostile or violent. And where that comes from something scaring them, being taken away from them, and like where the hive mind in some situations can actually be kind of dangerous. Now, like I said, this is the opening square. So this is the first 90-degree square that we're experiencing between Pluto and Mars, with Pluto in Aquarius. This was seated back around the 14th of February, and an opening square occurs when Mars is at the first opening 90-degree angle. So this represents a period of crisis in action. Think of it like the first quarter square after a new moon. A couple days after the new moon, you're going to see the moon square that sign, and then we're kind of like, oh, now we're seeing the themes of the new moon and we have to act on it. This is kind of similar. So really, this is the initial efforts to assert yourself or implement changes in the face of obstacles. So it's time to confront challenges head on rather than making necessary adjustments. This isn't really a period where you're like, I'll make a tweak, I'll do this, I'll do that. You're not gonna be able to do that. It's gonna be things that are gonna come up where you're gonna have to make a conscious decision to be brave, make a choice, cut something off, combat something, or decide that something is over and that you're not gonna kind of play the games. Now down the road, we are going to see several squares that are gonna be taking place, actually oppositions, and that'll be taking place during the Mars retrograde. And I'll talk about that in a second, but at the end of the year when this happens, we're going to see Mars then square this point and oppose Pluto in Aquarius. It'll happen several times. This will be when Pluto is just kind of coming back into Aquarius. So we'll see squares when Mars is actually in Cancer, and we'll see squares when Mars is in Leo, opposing Pluto, going back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius. So we're still going to see these collective themes revolving around what's going on with the collective, what's going on with groups, what's going on with politics, what's going on with our future, and lots of changes that are going to be taking place in regards to how leadership with the Mars retrograde is impacting that change for the collective. So the closing square won't actually happen until September of 2025. This will be in Scorpio, so I went and looked at some of those transits. The moon will actually be with Mars in Scorpio as well, and at least Mars will be in its home sign. But that'll be a time in the fall of 2025 where it will represent basically a time where we have to reflect on some of the actions that were taken now. Okay, so February and then also June of 2024. Things were being seeded, powerful groups were coming together, lots of changes with resources and finances and the planet. And whatever is happening now is going to get checked in September of next year. That's when we're going to see even more repercussions. It's a period for resolving lingering issues and letting go of what doesn't serve us and preparing ultimately for a new cycle before Mars comes into a conjunction with Pluto again, and that'll be in 2026. That's a while from now. But I reference these periods to let you know that there is going to be ripple effects. The effects of this conjunction will play out not only very, very much, I think, with Mars in Leo and the retrograde, but we will see even more fall of next year. I wanted to read to you guys a little bit from my Robert Hand book. Sometimes I bring this out, sometimes I don't. I use this a lot. This is one of my favorite books to have as a reference when I'm, doing work on charts or whatever. Sometimes even I find myself in a moment where I'm like, okay, how can I best kind of relay some of the most important kind of energies of a particular transit, like to a client. So sometimes when I'm preparing, this is a really great go-to book for me, just to give me a little bit more context to stuff. If you guys are ever wondering what books I'm using, there's a link below in the description. I made a list of all of the books that I use in my practice and sometimes the books and the decks that I use on my videos. Just click the book link and you can see that this is on there, but this is definitely top 5. All right, so I wanted to see what Robert Hand had to say about squares between Mars and Pluto, and this is what he wrote. This can be a time for creatively transforming the world around you, or it can be a time of fierce power struggles and disagreements. There are 2 poles that this transit swings between. Like all aspects of Mars, in transit to Pluto, this one arouses your ambitions and makes you want to get ahead. Your energy level is very high and you can use it to get a lot of work done. But unfortunately, you'll have a tendency to go about your work in such a way that you arouse great opposition from the people you confront, or you have to confront someone else's energies. In any case, you will have to deal with serious challenges to your ego, which may result in taking a different course of action from what you originally intended. Be sure that you haven't left any loose ends in what you have been doing up until now. If you have, they will trip you up and cause you to suffer defeat. Avoid the temptation of acting ruthlessly or underhandedly towards others, no matter how angry you are or how much you feel they deserve to be beaten. Transit cycles include Pluto have a strange way of total destruction at your own hands if you take illegitimate shortcuts. However, the consequences of your deceptive actions will not be apparent until the next time transiting Mars either conjoins or opposes natal Pluto. So in reference, when we start to see the opposition to Pluto, okay, which is going to be taking place when Mars goes into Leo, we will see the Mars opposition to Pluto and then the retrograde sometime around the end of November going into December. Okay. The transit can signify serious conflict between individual energies and the energies of a group. In this case, you may be a member of a group or you may be the individual. In either situation, this confrontation will be a significant test of strength to your intentions. Depending on how badly you want to do something, you will either fight for it harder or give up altogether. As you strive to get ahead, be careful that those in power over you do not oppose you. They are stronger now, and they would probably and you would probably lose to the confrontation. As with Mars-Pluto combinations, these energies and transits can lead to being the victim of someone else's ruthlessness, even to the point of violent assault and rare cases. Therefore, you should avoid dangerous places and violent people. It isn't likely, but it isn't worth the risk either. Okay? Interesting stuff. All right. So a lot of the same kind of being like, look, you know, you can kind of get bullied, or there can be something outside of you that's pressing on you. Are you going to fight Mars, or are you going to give up? You can throw in the towel and call it quits, Pluto. And then there's some of us that are like, I will die on this hill. I think that's very like Mars, Pluto. I'm feeling Mars is actually squaring my natal, Pluto is actually squaring my natal Mars right now. So like, I've been doing a lot of research on this particular transit and I resonate with a lot of it. Anyway, let me read to you guys the Sabian symbol. So the Sabian symbol is going to be 2 degrees of Taurus because it is 1 degree and 45 minutes. So we're going to round up, and I chuckled when I read this because I was like, I remember when Uranus was just first kind of going through Taurus and reading the degrees as Uranus was kind of moving, and then I kind of went back over it again when Jupiter was in Taurus recently. So this might sound a little familiar to some of you guys. Taurus 2, an electrical storm. The keyword is transformation. The theme is tension release. The symbol speaks to the impact in man's ability to influence the course of events by effectively meeting crisis with the full of himself. The image of an electrical storm inspires awe and fear of potential destruction. In the same way, men also fear themselves and their own potential for violence or destruction when they experience their anger rising or their emotions getting out of control. The release of stress by nature alludes to the fact that individuals also need to release their tensions that build up over time, especially in climactic moments of high intensity. The emphasis on the symbol is on catharsis, transformation, and the process of clearing away all that has outlived its usefulness and is no longer needed. At its highest, the symbol represents a special talent for dramatizing the most important issues at hand and calling attention to those likely to arise in the future. Watch for extreme shyness and sensitivity to criticism or fear of letting emotions get out of hand. The accent is on the climax. Things may culminate or come to a head today in the most dramatic way. Tension that's been building in some area is likely to be released. Your greatest advantage lies in keeping your head when all about you may be losing theirs. Pay particular attention to the symbolic significance of any crisis that occurs today and see how it applies in your own life. Guard against losing your temper or saying something you might later regret. Emotions are on full tide. Try not to let criticism or what other people get you down. Stepping stones are crisis, impact, climax, discharge, outburst, explosion, drama, clearance, release, tension, and catharsis. Lots of really good advice from these books. I remember a lot of like those squares that was going on when we were seeing squares between Saturn and Uranus when Saturn was in Aquarius. And even as I'm filming this video today, it was like hilarious. As soon as Mars started rolling into Taurus, lightning, thunder, all kinds of stuff was going on outside. And I was like, here we go. This is the battle of the Titans, you know, the clash of the Titans with Mars and Pluto squaring. I think that this is really referencing with the electrical storm, like a meltdown, you know, some meltdown happening. And it can be literal or figurative. Sometimes the Sabian symbols, I mean, not sometimes, they never cease to amaze me. Sometimes I see them materialize in real life. I think that, you know, really what it comes down to is when we see these hot emotions kind of run wild during this transit, we're going to be like, okay, where has that been eating away at us? Or where did we finally need to get it out? Where did we need to clear the air? I think this is going to be further, I think, intensified, because since yesterday we saw the moon in Leo. Now, as you guys are watching this on the 11th on Tuesday, the moon is still in Leo, and now it's coming into a square with Uranus. So we've got some fixed squares in the skies, which is talking about friction. Leo is dramatic, it's passionate, it's creative, it's about lovers' paths with these squares to Uranus. It's about wild swings in the market and lots of things kind of going buck wild financially. There's a lot of really interesting squares going on in the skies, both between the mutable Pisces and Gemini, and also the fixed planets. But I think the moon square Uranus is actually going to be triggering some things, because it's showing some of the same friction between financial matters and, people's, taking chances, taking risks. So like I said, the stock market, or things where people are doing speculative stuff, and the impact that's having on all of us collectively. So I'll be watching the markets today and kind of seeing what's going on, because I'm expecting some fireworks. Electrical storms, though, it can be basically talking about that moment where something overheats and it just breaks down and then it's just fried, whether it's a hard drive or a car, a cell phone. And so Mars is heat, right? And so even the Mars square Pluto is like where something gets overheated. Tensions, get to a point where things get very heated. And so we can see lots of conflict in, the way that we look at our political views, right? Aquarius, the way that we are with friends, something about our future goals. And there can definitely be a lot of butting heads with the square. But it wouldn't surprise me if we do hear about, power issues, heat and excessiveness. Certainly you're going to hear all of the environmental, people kind of going haywire, being like, oh, excess heat, record heat. We're seeing the summer heating up, at least in parts of the northern hemisphere, and the impact that this is going to be having on, the grid system, physically, what it can handle. And we're going to see Mars come into conjunction with Uranus here in like the next month or so. So it definitely does seem to kind of talk about where there is added pressure, and then something can like short circuit, something can go out. So I'm not gonna rule that out. What else? I think about also Venus being the dispositor of Mars. So Venus rules Taurus. We see Venus and the Sun actually that are still moving side by side. So some of us are already feeling fried because of that kind of conjunction with Venus that's been happening for days now. And Venus is coming out of a square with Saturn, where there's been, some delays and setbacks. Maybe in relationships, right? Venus, maybe in how we can communicate and express what we want or what we need. There's been some hesitation or questioning whether or not something is solid. And so I think with Venus and the Sun coming out of the square with Saturn, we've already seen some delays and setbacks. And so we can almost feel like, why hasn't the check cleared? Why haven't I gotten the raise? Why haven't they committed to me further? And then, we can start seeing people getting impatient with Mars and Taurus because they're not getting what they want, and they're starting to kind of lash out. So be mindful that it's almost like there's a delay, and because some people cannot be patient, there can be some really intense like tantrums and stuff that can kind of come from that. I talked to you guys a little bit about the Mars retrograde. I will just say that, this is down the road, but I think it's worthy of mentioning. So let me just show it to you really quick. I'm actually working on putting together a webinar for that. We will see Mars go into Leo in November. And what's going to be interesting is that you will see throughout the Mars retrograde. So by the time we get into early November, Mars is already in shadow. So it's already going through the degrees in Cancer in which it will retrograde through. But we're going to see several oppositions to Pluto. One that's at a critical degree on the 3rd. And then when we see Mars hit 1 degree, so this will be around the 7th and the 8th, it's going to be squaring that point, right? Even look at this, it's squaring and opposing. And then we're going to see Mars retrograde in early December. And Pluto then goes into Aquarius. And then while Mars retrogrades, it will come back into an opposition with Pluto again. So we're going to see 3 Mars-Pluto oppositions. And every I mean, a lot of the ones that I've seen correlate somehow with the moon or with other things. I won't go too deep into this. I will just say that, kind of referencing, you know, what Han said, when we have the opening square, we have to do something. So we may be pushed to defend ourselves in some way. We may see some military tension. We may see some kind of conflict going on, and we react, okay? And this is when the Mars retrograde happens, when it triggers that square. It's being brought back up again, and we're kind of like, oh, these are the results of, you know, what happened or what we did. Anyway, so the Mars-Pluto opposition is more people outside of ourselves. We're going to be feeling like there's a force outside of us that, you know, we don't feel like we have as much power, Mars retrograde, or control when it comes to Leo-related things. So it could be over our love life. It could be over our hobbies. It could be issues pertaining to art and entertainment and limitations to, you know, like crazy stuff like bars or, you know, cinemas or theaters. It could also mean that there is some challenge revolving around younger people. Mars is the archetype of a younger kind of man or a younger, vibrant energy. But this is independent on our own, what our goals are, what we want versus what's going on with the collective. We're also probably going to see themes revolving around changes in leadership. I'm definitely, you know, just thinking of like a list of people. I know this is going to definitely light up Zelensky's chart from Ukraine. I would assume this is also going to be lighting up Donald Trump's chart, knowing that he's a Leo rising, and he's going to be having this retrograde that's going to be taking place technically in his 12th house. And I think the last time we had this retrograde, if I remember correctly, was back in like the end of 2008, beginning of 2009. So I'm wondering if that's any correlation or kind of shadowing of some of the things that was happening when we had a change in leadership with Obama. Obviously, pretty famous Leo sun, and I believe I think he's a Leo rising, if I remember correctly. Anyway, I'm doing a whole video on that. I'm putting that together right now. I don't want to get too off in politics, but basically, this is when we're going to start kind of realizing some of the effects of some of the action that we may have taken too hastily now. This is also going to be taking place at 1 degree, okay? So when we see the square that is taking place now, let's go back to June, it's happening at 1 degree. So this is a degree that deals with Aries-related energy, okay? So I'll give you guys a whole list of these things. Get back to today. There we go. I'm going to read to you guys all my favorites. A little bit of degree theory, just as a reminder. So if you follow degree theory, 1, 13, and 25 degrees, they all correlate with Aries energy. This is just another way of giving us a little bit more of a flavor of how this is potentially going to play out. So 1 degrees is about things that we construct or things that we build. It can be about contractors. It can also be about demolishing things that we produce, like factories or workshops. Just saw something recently in the news that was talking about yet another, I don't know if it was like a farm or it was like a processing plant, but something about, I think it was here in Texas, there was some kind of other blow up situation involving like a bunch of cattle or cows. Not unusual with Mars and Taurus transit. You know, if you guys think back to what happened, you know, to the January 6th incident, you know, front headlines all over the world. You see like the QAnon, you know, shaman, at least that's what they call him. But, you know, literally Mars enters Taurus and you see this guy, you know, raging war all over the place on the front page with his horns and his battle cry. And to me, it never ceases to amaze me the way that the archetypes really play out. And it's like as above, so below. I have another example for you, but I'll read this. It's also connected to soldiers, uniforms, weapons, rifles, pistols, bullets, and anything in regards to military, angles, engineers, things that are sharp like needles, knives, or to cut. This is also about bravery, hardworking, being enthusiastic, your head, the top of your head to bleed, or your nose. Things that are red, flame, matchsticks, firemen, torches, physical injuries, blows, aggressions, assault, fights, things connecting to Germany, things that are hot and spicy, sports, sportsman, muscular, manliness, masculinity, and to be the leader, to be the first. Okay, so we'll see how that materializes in Taurus, because we've got a lot of Mars kind of Aries energy, but it's being funneled through Taurus. So it may tame it a little bit. We'll see. All right, so let's now, I'm going to give you guys just a short list of just some things that I jotted down that I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's very like Mars in Taurus, square Pluto in Aquarius. So off the bat, I can't talk about squares to Pluto and Aquarius without talking about politics, right? And so that's probably one of my favorite topics, is to look at what's going on politically and astrologically without unpacking a bunch of charts. I will just say something that I think is fascinating that's going on at this time is it's all kind of over the news. You may not see it on your mainstream news channels, but it's all over independent media. Major changes that are going on right now. We've got a bunch of elections that have been taking place in Europe. I live here in the United States, so if you live in Europe, if you want to give us any information, please leave comments below. We would love to hear from people who live there. But major changes, and we're seeing the power of people, okay? Mars rules the North Node. So the power of people and physical power is Mars in Taurus. Physical, you have to do something. It's an earth sign. This is squaring Pluto, so it's challenging the existing power. The Pluto square is challenge to existing politicians. Pluto's retrograde, so we're seeing transformation. We're seeing some kind of purging or some kind of gutting of, parliaments and leaders and stuff like that. But Taurus is slow movement, right? It's brick by brick. So we're seeing where, there's a couple different here and there that are changing, but it may kind of build up into this kind of collective like change where we're seeing movements that are happening because there's so many changes going on with politics. Green parties all over are collapsing in Europe as of the most recent EU elections. In my opinion, I feel like a lot of it is connected to national identity and anti-immigration parties really pushing the hard line on some of their beliefs and campaigning on that, and seeing that people are turning out in their voting and they're sharing some of the same perspectives. Ireland, France, Germany, and Belgium are just a few of the ones that are making headlines this week. I've read a lot of media from all over the place. To me, I guess my takeaway is basically like, the press is claiming that far right leaders are dominating the EU parliamentary elections. But I don't necessarily know about that. I saw that Vivek posted on Twitter. He said, there's a possibility that believing in national borders and the rule of law is actually just mainstream. Interesting. That's some food for thought. Obviously, I mean, my interpretation is that, like pro-war politicians are being harshly punished in EU elections. And I'm wondering the impact that that's going to have here in the United States. We're going to be having our presidential election taking place in November. I'm hoping that this is a sign to, the current administration and also any of the other candidates that are running, that it's not looking so positive for people who are pro-war and open borders, and people who are also really focused on dissolving any sense of, national security. And I'm hoping that this is enough to realize that we need to have leadership that's giving peace a chance and not continuing to beat the war drum. All right, on to money. So we are seeing some big things happening. So you may or may not know, but the petrodollar ended on the 9th of June, and we're essentially in a new era. So there was a 50-year deal between the USA and Saudi Arabia to sell oil only in dollars. That's no longer happening. Last week was the sharpest decline in the US dollar across border payments in history. It's very obvious that sanctioning, countries has backfired. We see BRICS nations aligning. We see Russia working with China with this, and other members of the world that are joining in. I think this is making Bitcoin and gold look all that much more attractive to some world governments as we start to see the US dollar kind of fracture. Some are claiming that it's possible that this could put some banks on the brink of collapse, because there's no more oil for dollar program. So the impact that this is going to have, at least on the US dollar and on US banking, and then a domino effect on the world, is pretty imminent, I think. And I think there's definitely turbulent times and major geopolitical changes ahead as a result of this, now that countries are opting to not do business with the US dollar. On environmental news, this is something that piqued my interest this morning. I came across an article where an Idaho farmer's water is being shut off. He claims water shutoff order on literally 500,000 acres of farmland and a lot of farmers, and the impacts that this is having on them, about 6,400 water users. Per the farmer, he said that property like this will become worthless without water. The land doesn't have any value here. The state of Idaho has put a water curtailment order, which basically shuts the water off on his farmland. And he asks this, why now? After we've planted our crops, we have crops in the ground and are already growing. Now in the middle of June, they pull the curtailment order and say that you must cease pumping water. The cost is huge. An acre of potatoes costs upwards of $4,000 an acre to grow. How will that ever be recovered? They will not grow without water. And what will that do to everyone else who is reliant in this area upon the crops and the state of Idaho? What will countries do for roads and bridges and police departments and ambulances and hospitals that rely on tax and tax base? Property like this will become worthless without water. The land doesn't have any value here. Taurus is farmers. Mars can be, the anger, the frustration, the work that is now being threatened as a result of new control within state and local government. Now remember, Saturn rules Aquarius traditionally. Saturn is in Pisces. I've been telling you guys since Saturn went into Pisces that the next real limitations were going to be water. Private companies buying up water, and also utility companies, which are now going to have a huge effect on not only price but also availability of water. Really sad for farmers who are out there basically planting this stuff to be able to provide for us, and they will have a loss. $4,000 per acre, and he's got like that much acreage. Almost 500,000. I mean, they'll never recover. It'll put them in a situation where things aren't growing, they don't have anything to sell, and then eventually that land is going to be deemed almost worthless. For what? For other companies or institutions or government to have to be able to buy pennies on the dollar. It's another way of Pluto exercising its power and control over Taurus. And I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to, if there's no farmers, there's no food. If you control the food, you control the people. And last but not least, this is a bonus. I'll see. I don't know if I can put this into the video today, but this morning I was just scrolling, just kind of doing my morning kind of roll through with what's going on the internet, and I saw that an Oregon rodeo went haywire. This is horrific. A rodeo bull leaps over the railing into the crowd at an Oregon crowd who is out watching, I guess like bull riding. The bull does a lap, comes around, runs loose, jumps the fence where there is like a border, I guess like a border fence where they have stands of people watching the bull riders. Jumps into the stand, runs through the rodeo premises, and essentially bulldozes several people left and right, just head on attacks them, attacking trash cans too. It's like complete chaos while some people are watching from the bleachers. There's several different angles of what's going on, not just with the bull jumping into the crowd, but also running through kind of like part of the arena. And there's people just standing at the top of the bleachers, above, filming the whole fiasco. I mean, horrible. Like, I looked at it and I was like, I can't even laugh at this, because it's like, this is astrology in action. And I guess I was telling my husband, he's like, well, yeah, you can make connections to anything. I'm like, no, this is so literal. Pluto in Aquarius essentially talks about some, situation where a group of people are potentially in danger. It could become deadly. Mars, obviously, anger, hostility, frustration, seeing red, right? Getting agitated because of Pluto, and starts being combative and can attack the crowd of people. Obviously, it's going viral on the internet right now, at least from what I've seen. That could be Aquarius. And it was just complete chaos. I mean, and then in the background, as the bull is running and getting ready to jump into the stands, you hear them blasting "God Bless America" over the loudspeakers. It was quite literal. Apparently several people were injured and required medical attention. Obviously, this is astrology in action. As above, so below. Just goes to show you to be mindful around crowds during this transit, especially if there's any wild animals. You know, Mars and Taurus could be game animals. It could be elephants. It could be, you know, bears. It could be bulls. It could be anything that's like hunt or game animals. We may hear more about these types of situations as this is applying and starting to separate over the next day or two. I'll leave you with this. Mars in Taurus, where Pluto is definitely going to be intense. It's about transformation. It can manifest as power struggles and significant changes. But to navigate this productively, remember, be mindful of the tricks that Pluto will play. There's definitely some power dynamics out here, but if we embrace change, focus on the constructive action, kind of keep our blinders on, focus on what we are building, and we're cultivating patience and also awareness, and we practice self-reflection, we can work with this in a more positive way. I'd love to hear your Mars-Pluto stories. Are you born with Mars square Pluto? Are you going through a Pluto square Mars transit? And what do you guys make of some of the stuff that's going on? Obviously, I'm thinking positive thoughts. I don't want to hear about some attack or anything like that kind of going on in the news. I would rather not, but I do think that we're not over with this transit yet. So be mindful it's happening today. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I will catch you guys all back here on Thursday. Take care.